'cause I'm setting the trap, thought I could beat it. Calling the trap, yeah. Calling the trap, I can't believe it. Calling the trap.
Hey y'all, welcome to the Coyote Trapping School Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Pope, and my goal is to help you get started trapping and to help you and me become better trappers. If you need trapping supplies, be sure to visit Kaatz Brothers Lures, KAATZBROS.com. They carry a full line of trapping equipment, baits and lures, as well as instructional books and DVDs. They're great people to deal with, and they'll get you set up right. Now, let's talk trapping. So tonight I figured I'd do a kind of a roundup episode of my recent Texas Trapline trip. So for those of you maybe that are listening to the podcast, I did do a weekly or a daily trapline video for every day of the trip, and so I got a lot of good feedback, a lot of enjoyment out of that. Kind of maybe built it up a little more than I guess I produced, especially with the possibility of running across a mountain lion. Spoiler alert, but we never did run across a mountain lion. We saw some sign, saw some tracks as big as my hand. I mean, it was pretty awesome in that respect, just to see the amount of lion sign that we saw there. But I figured I'd kind of give you a run through. So this was an out of state trip for me. The second, I guess, that I've done recently. So last year I did go to Ohio trapping. Outside of that, really, except for a summertime job trapping in Alaska, trapping foxes in Alaska, the only other out-of-state trip, I guess you could say, that I've been on was about 10 years ago. I went to South Texas trapping, and that was a blast. It was different. So this time I was in West Texas, close to New Mexico. We were trapping right on the Rio Grande River. I mean, Mexico was right there, and so that was a pretty neat experience. It was different. The country was a lot different than what I encountered in South Texas. South Texas is a lot of high fence ranches. They're growing deer and deer hunting, and they got more of a lot more, more to mesquite, and more of the I guess the vegetation was a little bit bigger than what we encountered in West Texas. In West Texas, it was very much a desert environment for the most part, and there wasn't a whole lot that was above knee high, much less really waist high. So that was definitely different. I don't think I'm really torn, because, and I'm probably jumping ahead here, but I expected to catch more coyotes than we did, and I know we missed some coyotes and had some opportunities that we didn't capitalize on. In my mind, I did anticipate more coyotes, and I don't know how that shakes out. I definitely know there was room for improvement on my part, but I didn't feel like we were missing a pile of coyotes every day. So, like I say, I don't really know exactly how that shakes out. So, as an overall summary, we caught 7 gray fox, 6 bobcats, 4 coyotes, 17 skunks, 13 coons, and 2 beavers. So we had a really successful trip, and I'll kind of break it down. Officially, out of all the traps, we had, I guess, roughly 11 overall check nights. Now, we didn't get a whole lot of traps set the first day, and then we added some more later. So probably overall average 9 to 10 check days across all the traps average. So that put us at 49 critters for that week and a half time frame, and it was definitely, the skunks really surprised me. I wasn't expecting that much skunk activity. I mean, we had one particular location. I think we had 5 skunks at that one location. So that really surprised me. But you're talking about the terrain and all. It was definitely a desert environment. We were in the foothills of a mountain range there, so we didn't quite get up into the mountains. You could kind of see them right there. But with the Rio Grande River running through like it did, that river bottom was just super lush. I mean, there was a lot of green grass. There were cattle running on these ranches, and that's where a lot of the cattle concentrated because of all the green grass. And so it was really almost like 2 different environments. That was a pretty neat thing to deal with, to see just the contrast there. It wasn't just miles and miles of creosote and cactus and kind of a monotonous terrain. We had a pretty good mix. So for starters, I don't know if y'all can hear that. There's a siren going by, and my dog is raising Cain. But for starters, for getting out there, so one big leg up I had for me was I had a contact out there. And I've had some folks, reply and comment about, I hope I could take a trip out there one day. And this is my second trip to Texas, and really, I didn't, determine or work out the logistics on either of them. I was invited on the first one, and then this one, me and my partner Ryan, he had actually worked for me several years prior, and then wound up being in West Texas, and he was calling me, talking about trapping some of the beavers, and I'll get into that in a little bit, and he just mentioned the possibility of being able to line some land up out there. I said, man, if you can line some land up out there, I'll come trap. And so we kind of put it together. So, from an out-of-state, kind of state-hopping perspective, if you will, having that local contact really gave me a leg up from what I've heard. I listened to some of the Trapping Today podcast and some of those guys that Jeremiah interviews on there talking about long lining and out-of-state trips. And, that's one of the biggest things is a lot of times coming up with places to trap can be the easy part, but finding a place to stay, a place where you can handle your fur that's reasonable or free, so to speak, that can be a real that can be one of the main sticking points in working out the logistics of it. So having somebody local was a huge plus there. Another thing you've got to keep in mind is the license requirements. So I figured this out on my previous trip to Texas. Texas is pretty liberal with their trapping regulations, but there's one major caveat really to me with bobcats that'll catch trappers off guard. So that there's 2 different. I guess they've got it set up as 2 different ways. There's a recreational trapping season and a commercial trapping season. And so for the recreational trapping season, that's, if you don't intend to sell your catch, and all of that can be covered from the best that I can understand, through the recreational hunting license. And you only need a commercial trapping license if you intend to sell your catch. And then for coyotes and hogs, I'm pretty sure there's no hunting license required at all. So that's another little extra there. The one thing that we found out our first trip to Texas is we had all gotten the commercial trapping license, and when we had our bobcats, come to find out, bobcats are not considered a fur bearer. They're considered a game animal, and so you have to have a hunting license to harvest bobcats. And so, and those are some of the intricacies that, even some of the game wardens and things may not realize, because as trappers, we tend to, our default's going to be, if you got your trapping license, you're covered for trapping. And in that situation, you gotta have both. So that's where it can be really helpful to touch base with a game warden or somebody in the state agency prior to going out there, just to kind of get a feel for any little intricacies like that. Another thing that I thought was neat was the recreational option. So if you were to happen to have a hunt lined up or something like that, where you don't necessarily intend to. I mean, I didn't go out there to make money trapping fur. I'm probably going to wind up having most of what I call tanned. So if you don't intend to sell, if you're just going out there, stay with some relatives or something like that, and you're trying to catch a pretty bobcat or a badger or something like that, and double check me, but the recreational hunting license may very well cover all of that. So that was kind of a neat thing, because it's a cheaper option of doing the hunting license versus the trapping license, because the trapping license is considered commercial, and so the idea is you're going to make money off using that license. So it seemed like there was one other thing I wanted to mention on that, but I can't think of it now. So the next thing to highlight was, somebody asked me, I'd like to see you some information on packing, how you packed. And I wished I kind of went through it in the last video of pulling and coming home, but there was not a lot of strategy to packing other than throw pretty much every piece of trapping equipment I had in the back of the truck. That's really a lot of what it was, just because you never know, having never been out there to West Texas, to this location, you don't really know what to expect. You don't know what you may need or not need, so you wind up taking really more than you need. Of course, I took some spares to make sure I had some spares, and then I took alternatives as another thing. So, like for pan covers, the last time I trapped South Texas, I was using polyfill under the pan, and we had problems with the mice or rats out there in the woods or in the desert digging that polyfill out, and so we had to switch to trash bag. We had to get rid of the polyfill, and so I took some unscented trash bags, I took wax paper, and I took a big bag of polyfill. Polyfill wound up working fine this time, but just little things like that you never know exactly what's gonna play out, and so having some backups and having some alternatives is definitely a big plus. As far as trap wise, here in Georgia we're limited to a number 2 size trap or smaller. So the majority of all of my footholds really are, all of my predator traps are MB550s for the most part. So that's mainly what made up my trap line. Now, one of the big drivers drivers for me going out there was the possibility of catching a mountain lion. And I talked with a few folks beforehand, and I obviously knew that the MB550 was not ideal for trapping a mountain lion. I think with the right catch and just the perfect situation, I think it's still very doable, but not ideal. So what I wound up doing is I think I got 9 number 5 Bridger beaver foothold traps, and I wound up modifying them, actually put an Expand-A-Pan on all those traps. I'll see how I like that through this beaver trapping season, but and so that was my lion setup. So we ran across 9 or 10 different sets of lion tracks. Now I'm sure, location wise and as much ground as those mountain lions can cover, some of that was probably the same lion, but for the most part, wherever we saw, sure enough, lion tracks, that's where we set a lion trap. And so that's what I was setting. I was setting the number 5 Bridgers. I was using saber-tooth drags and 10 feet of chain. I think 10 feet of chain is probably on the short side, but most of the areas where we set those traps was down in the river bottom, and there was a lot. I was able to I pre-hooked all the chains to begin with. There's a lot of mesquite and a lot of salt cedar, things like that down in the kind of the arroyos and in the low-lying areas that I wasn't too concerned about having things to hang up on. So I did talk with one one gentleman on my way out there, anyway, right before I left, and he said his, he likes about 25 feet of chain attached to his drag, which I can, especially once you get into the more deserty areas where there's not as much to hang up and hook up on. I can definitely see where longer chain would be a plus. So I guess getting into the trap line itself, one of the things right off the bat is going into a situation like that, you got to be adaptable, and you got to be willing to shift on the fly and change plans. And so the area that we had lined up, we had 3 different ranches. We anticipated setting heavier on the furthest ranch. So one of the things is our trap line wasn't super efficient because we were staying at a house kind of in town, very small town. We were staying at a house in town. We had to ride, I think we wound up doing about 120 miles round trip. And so we had to ride an hour or so just to get kind of into the mountain area where we were setting traps. And then, we had a trap line starting from there and going in. So we definitely, just logistics wise and efficiency wise, if there's some way that you could, running a longer trap line like that, you're always looking for ways to maximize and have you a circular route where you're not deadheading and things like that. Well, we weren't able to capitalize on that at all, but we were working with what we had. So the one ranch, the farthest in ranch, kind of the dead end, if you will, ranch that we were kind of anticipated setting the bulk of the traps on, we actually wound up only setting a handful, pulling most of them. I think it may have been, it was definitely a good lion location. I think there was a pretty rugged canyon in the back, but it was going to take a lot of walking, and just it was going to slow us down for the most part. Is kind of what what we kind of decided. We wound up seeing so much sign on the way in that we didn't have any qualms with pulling out of that. But I think that was like a 6,000 acre ranch. But kind of trapping from the road and using our time as best we could. Roads, didn't allow that much access to it, and so we just we set a few traps on there, and we wound up pulling those traps. I don't think we made a catch on that ranch at all. We wound up pulling those traps and just pulling out of there altogether. And so that is another reason that doing something like that, it really pays to have more land lined up than you really think you need, because you don't know how things are going to work out. You don't know if you show up and the landowner's got deer hunters in there and he doesn't want you trapping in there. You never know. So that's just kind of a general trap line rule anyway, is to always try to have more land than you really need. But definitely in a out of state scenario, I would say that's even more important, just because you don't know how things are going to play out. Another thing we realized is really having a different vehicle. Having a UTV or an ATV or maybe a smaller truck would have allowed us to access more areas. So there was a pretty good main road going in through the most of the ranches, but then there was all these spur roads kind of going off up into the foothills, and a lot of those were pretty narrow, pretty rough roads that you didn't want to take a full-size pickup off in. But if you had a Ranger or a four-wheeler or something like that, you could have really covered more ground. And really that came into play later on in the trip, as after we got kind of the main location set up, and then having some time left over after checking traps. I mean, that's what would have been ideal, which that brings up another point, that I really needed more traps than we had too. I think we were running between beaver traps and everything, we're probably right at 100 traps total. And you know, with the ground we had to cover, just getting to the trap line and all that worked out pretty good. But it wouldn't have hurt my feeling. I mean, we could have covered some more ground and we had some more opportunity if we had some more traps. So some more traps and having I guess a better off-road suited vehicle, I guess you could say, definitely something to keep in mind, especially with the, you know, as many people have those ATVs and stuff now. And another thing that kind of ran into, which was not something you hear of that often, is, you know, there was a lot of farmland kind of around the town, down right along the border, and that just, if you ride through that, I mean, it was prime predator habitat, you know, because you had all the fields, and the fields were pretty clean, but there was there was kind of a levee that ran all along the river, the Rio Grande River, and then there were these series of canals. You know, a lot of the canals were brushy, and there'd be little kind of wetland areas that were just slam full of brush and all, and it just screamed predator location. But they do a lot of farming, a good bit of cotton farming down there, and a lot of the farmers apparently like the coyotes and bobcats, because jackrabbits, you know, rabbits can tend to have their up and down cycles, but apparently those rabbits out there, when they're on their peak, when they're in high years, they'll come and, you know, as soon as that cotton sprouts up out of the ground, they'll come and just mow it down. And those farmers out there like the coyotes and the bobcats for trying to keep the rabbits under control so they don't predate, I guess, on as much of their crops. And so in a lot of instances, you know, where I'm at, a lot of places in the South, you get a open door to go trap coyotes on someplace. There, you know, we didn't get as much access to some of that farm ground that you would have expected, and so that also limited us in our efficiency too. We definitely could have covered some ground and probably helped our numbers out by being able to set some of that farm country, but weren't able to, and that's just how it goes sometimes, you know. For location wise, down in the farm country, you know, you had tractor lanes and roads and the canals and things. I mean, it was, you know, all the classic locations that you can think of for trapping. But up in the desert, there weren't near as many roads, and what we found there were dry washes, dry creek beds, if you will. They called them arroyos, and those seem to be the main travel paths, which if you kind of looked at the landscape from a predator standpoint, you know, those were the areas that had a little bit more water, were a little bit lower lying, and so they typically had more vegetation than when you get up on the hills and start getting into the sure enough desert country. And a lot of it was really a mix. The ground out there was really different. There were parts that were just super rocky. I mean, you'd see where they cut some of the roads into the hillsides, and it was just layers and layers of rocks. And then there was other parts that just be a super deep sand bed. And some of those arroyos, it was really sandy. You could walk out there and just see, you know, the tracks, and some of them was just super rocky, and you couldn't really tell anything. But that was where we keyed in on a lot of locations, using those, you know, because looking for intersections and things like that, using those arroyos and setting in those areas where that waterway intersected with the road. One thing, there was cattle on all the ranches, not just because of the for, I guess, the feed, the quality of the ground. There wasn't as many cattle as you would see back east or probably in the Midwest or anywhere, but you know, there were definitely areas, you know, around the feed stations and all where there were pretty heavy cow trails, and I think maybe we could have set those up and done a little bit better. You know, initially we were trying to avoid cows. That's what I always do, is trying to avoid cows and get away from cows. And I think we may could have used used some of those and maybe increased our locations a little bit more. I did order before going on this trip. I ordered Kyle Cott's Trapline Anecdotes, his New Mexico coyote trapping trips, and one of the things he talked about in there was trapping around the cattle trails, and one of his tricks was to set right off the trail, but close enough where the cow could lean over and sniff, because the cows tend to be pretty curious. If he smelled the bait, and he'd lean over and sniff and smell at the hole, but he didn't have to step off the trail where he'd step into your trap. And I really like that. Haven't field tested that, but I really like that idea, and it seems to make a lot of sense. So that's one thing I think, looking back, I may would have done differently. Did have one coyote that really frustrated me more so than any others. Probably the third or fourth check, me and Ryan, we had set traps on each side of the road, and in a smaller arroyo, a wash, and we came and both of our traps were dug. Now the traps weren't dug up, weren't flipped out of the bed. They were just dug at just enough to kind of uncover part of the trap, and you could see coyote tracks just plain as day. This was a really sandy area, and you could see those coyote tracks plain as day. And I messed. I mean, my trap was solid. So the only thing that really makes sense for that issue is that the coyote smelt my trap. So I put some more bait out, rebedded the trap, and actually he came back and stole my bait without getting caught, without digging the trap up. And so after that, I set another trap behind the first trap, rebaited baited it heavy. Actually, so the second time that he came back, I had a jar of beaver hearts and livers that I kind of saved for catfish bait. I said, man, this is fresh, I'm going to use this, and I just dumped it in the hole and kind of covered it. It was super sandy, so it was hard to get a really good hole in. Between the sand and the rocks, it was kind of hard to get a hole in some places, but tried to cover it up a little bit, and he came and hammered that. And so after that, I set a beaver leg, but we only had like one or two tricks after that. I set a beaver leg, nailed it down, and then put another trap behind the first trap, blended them in, and he never came back. So that was disappointing. And that was a location where we actually saw a coyote laying in the road after we had the traps dug. So I don't really know the point of telling you that story, other than, when I had that happen, it concerned me about the way I did the traps, because this year I treated my traps, I just spray painted them, I pressure washed them, spray painted them with Rust-Oleum, and then dipped them in Full Metal Jacket. And it had me a little bit concerned about that process, but those were the only traps that were messed with like that gave me concern about something maybe on the traps. We had javelinas come through and mess up some of our traps. We had hogs come through and mess up some of our traps. And then we had a couple of pullouts, but nothing other than that gave me any concerns. I really don't know what happened there. We set a couple more traps kind of on the road, more of a scent post set that I really thought would pay off, and it never did. And it's just one of those things. One of the things that kind of going off of what I just talked about, using the beaver leg and things, is I'm thinking and working and playing with using more kind of fresh bait this year. And so with my beaver tails and my beaver tail leather and all that I've been doing, I've been saving the inside of the tail. It's just fatty, gristly part of the tail, and I noticed my dog just if I throw him one of those, he absolutely loves it. I said, man, if he loves it, coyotes and other stuff should love it too. And excuse me, I feel like I had really good reception of using those tails at sets, and so that's definitely something that I'm going to try. I know a lot of people will use beaver tail oil, and I've used a little bit of that and hadn't seen great success, but we'll see how it progresses through the rest of the season. But so far, I've got a really good feeling about using those beaver tails. It's just something, that I've already got on hand, and go ahead and use. And I think that it'll keep better. I don't think it's going to rot as bad, and this is just me pondering, because it's it's mainly fat. It's not a lot of meat, so I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I will say I was introduced to some of the gumbo clay or gumbo mud that you hear people talk about, especially out west. Here in Georgia we've got red clay, which can get pretty sloppy and messy, but usually it's just slick on top, and you give it 30 minutes and it dries out. Or if you can get that slop off, you're good to go. I mean, it's not something that's gonna shut you down for the most part. But man, we had a situation out there that really gave us a good scare. We were actually going to pull a couple of beaver traps that had not been productive at all, and so we were going down a canal. There was a field on the low side, and the roads along the canal are built up, and then you got the canal, and there was an intersection where another canal came in, actually went under the canal that we were driving on, and fed back in, and that clay, it couldn't have rained more than a quarter inch. I mean, most a quarter inch, and that clay just turned. It was like that. It turned just slicker than snot, and it was bad. And we didn't realize it until we got up there and went to try to make the turn right at the intersection of those two canals, and he just started sliding, and there was like a 6-foot drop off right there, and it was nothing. And he stopped, and I guarantee you there wasn't 16 inches from his tire to the edge of that hole, and it had already previously started sloughing off, so it wasn't like concreted solid hole, and fortunately we were able to get him backed up away from being right on the precipice of sliding off. But then we actually had to get one of the farmers to come in and drag us out around the field. It was a whole fiasco, and if you've trapped very long, you know that's just kind of par for the course. That's going to happen. You're going to get stuck. That's all part of it, and that's one of the things that after the fact, now a couple weeks out, we can look back and kind of laugh at that and have a good time about it. But in the moment, it was not a laughing matter, I can assure you. The crazy thing about it was, just with him trying to drive on that stuff, or you take your foot and just kick the top layer off. I mean, the top quarter inch of mud, and it was dry dirt, dry sand underneath it, and that was one of the wildest things. But man, it was sloppy. There again, having somebody local that you can contact. I mean, we'd have been out of luck if we didn't have a farmer's phone number or something. I mean, we'd be walking for a while trying to flag somebody down, hoping that out of the goodness of their heart they would help us. So that was my introduction to the gumbo that gumbo clay, gumbo mud that folks talk about. We kind of touched on this before, but just the lion sign that we saw, man, that was really impressive. When I was in South Texas, we ran across one mountain lion track, and I never dreamed we would see 9 or 10 different sets of tracks. Possibly even saw a mountain lion one day. I'm 100% sure that it was a cat. I feel pretty confident it was a mountain lion and not a big bobcat. It was a pretty good sized cat. Never saw the long tail that would have really confirmed, but man, that sucker was moving so fast. He was running probably 150 yards in front of us down the road, and he just jumped across the road and went up this canyon like it was nothing. And we got up there and scrambled up. Took us 15 minutes to get to the top of the canyon and look out. Of course, we didn't see anything, but that was really cool. I wished I could have at the very least got a confirmed mountain lion sighting, because I don't think I've ever seen a mountain lion for sure in the wild for sure. So that was pretty neat. Talking about mountain lions and my mountain lion setup, So I actually did. This was a first, but I did catch one of the ranchers' grandkids. So there was one location that the guy that was running cattle in there, he told us that kind of at the head of this canyon there was a spring, a really neat little place. There was a natural spring coming out. There was a warm water spring and a cool water spring. And he said they had a guy maybe 5 or 6 years ago come in and trap, and they said he supposedly caught 3 lions out of that canyon. And he just kind of brushed down the canyon to make a walk through, and I'm sure he put some scent or something somewhere. So I did that. We were, backed off a little bit. There was one big rock right in the middle of the canyon, and I said, man, that's perfect. So I took some. It was tough to find any branches or anything to kind of brush the canyon up with, but I found a little bit, and kind of put those in the center of the wash, and left just a spot big enough to walk between that brush and that big rock. Put my number 5 bridger in. I didn't cover the pan. I left the pan exposed. Had an expander pan. I put sticks around it, trying to direct the foot placement. I actually, because that was kind of up in the mountains and there wasn't as much for the drag to catch on, I took some extra chain, and I did wind up putting probably 20 feet of chain on that. So I probably had about 30 feet of chain on that drag. That was, if you followed, I had a trail camera set on that and had some aoudad come through, which was pretty cool to see. But the family came in for Thanksgiving, and they went up to see the spring because that's one of the neat places in the area, and that kid walked right through my walkthrough just like I would have wanted him to, and he stepped right in the trap. And like I said, the pan was exposed, and he said he saw it, but he stepped in the trap, and you could hear him on the trail camera. He turned around and said, "I'm caught in a trap," and when I found that out, I kind of got a little bit worried, but they were super cool with it. The family was actually they were from one of the cities. They just come out to the ranch on occasion, and so they weren't super familiar with trapping and all that. But the granddad, he was, and he got the trap off, and the kid was fine. I mean, they were laughing and joking. Even the mom, I think she was panicked at first, and I can understand, but they were kind of laughing and joking about it. Like, man, that's one of those situations. I mean, you got to be prepared for anything as a trapper, and you got to take precautions, and they knew we were out there trapping. All the right people knew the right things, and we had permission, everything was in place, but just using common sense, and that's what I was thinking, man. If I wasn't setting specifically for a mountain lion, I would have never set a trap that big on land, and stepping in a MB 550 is nothing, because it won't even catch your foot, and but it's in the same time, it's there again, it just goes to show that traps aren't going to break legs or break people's legs, and they don't really pose a danger to people as much as a lot of people think they do, but just something to be aware of, and that was one of the situation, though. Actually, when I was talking with the parents, they were in town, and we were staying kind of right across from where they were, and we had a pretty good catch that day. We had a bobcat and beaver and some different things, and we stopped in because they had a skunk in a cage trap, and we were going to take care of the skunk for them, and somebody there happened to look over to the bed of the truck. As trappers, we kind of try to keep a low key. You don't want to draw a lot of attention to ourselves. And somebody had looked over to the bed of the truck and saw the animals. And they said, "Oh wow, can we show the kids that?" And so I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." And so we dropped the tailgate and kind of pulled the animals out on the tailgate, and it just having opportunities like that really reinforced to me that people are really interested in what we do, but the majority of people aren't against trapping. they may not understand it, but if we can explain it rationally and logically, and show that we're not out to cause harm, we're trying to manage populations in a humane and ethical way, people appreciate that, and just the opportunity that could be provided. I mean, you're talking about, for the most part, some city kids that have never seen or put their hands on a beaver or bobcat. Even most country kids have never put their hand on a beaver or bobcat, and so just to expose people to that and kind of give a little bit of the why of what we're doing, I think those opportunities are invaluable, because all those people there that didn't really know trapping, heck, that their family got caught in a trap, and they were super interested and wanting to know more and learn more, and so just taking those opportunities to try to educate people of what we're doing and why we're doing it. I think we have a lot of opportunity to sway people to be in pro trapping versus anti-trapping. So that I don't know why, but it always amazes me running into situations like that. It's just like so many other things, but we as trappers take for granted that people have never seen a skunk up close or a fox up close or anything like that, and so having the opportunity to show and like I say, to kind of tell our story of why we're doing what we're doing is I think it's powerful, and it can work for us. So with that, I guess the one thing to kind of wrap up on was the beaver portion. Beavers can be caught most anywhere. I don't know why the heck you go to West Texas to trap beavers. Well, mountain lions were kind of the main driver, but beavers were a close second, just because in that area with those canals and all, they have a pretty sizable bounty on beavers, because they of their dams and how they block the water, and those canals are essential for irrigating all that farmland, and if you get a few dams in the right or wrong places, and that can really wreak havoc. So that was kind of the financing method, so to speak, of trying to go out there and at the very least cover the cost of getting out there through trapping those beavers and trying to help with that situation. So that's one of the things, when you look at, I was actually looking at the other day at I would absolutely love to trap a wolf, and there's a program, I'm not sure how many states it's in, but I know it's in Idaho, where you can get like $750 for a wolf if you trap it. I think maybe the landowners participate in this program where they have to pay into it. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I'm sure you've probably seen pictures on Instagram or Facebook, and that really intrigues me, not from the standpoint of the money, only because a trip like that is not cheap to do, and I'm going for the experience more so than the money at this point. I'm fortunate enough to be in the situation where that's kind of that's my elk hunting, or that something like that. I mean, that's a trip that I can take, and if I can make a little money, that's great. If but I may not even be concerned with that. I'm just looking for the experience. But if I can at least cover the cost of the trip, well, that's all the better. And so that's the one that I just caught my eye the other day, that these opportunities may not really be publicized, but there's opportunities out there, and I don't know what other ones, but there are opportunities to, like I say, at the very least, cover your costs and have the experience of a lifetime in the process. And so that's something I hope to kind of learn more about, and maybe share more of if I can find some different ones, because I know there's a lot of y'all out there that would love to do the same thing and have the same experience of catching some of these bucket list animals, but figuring out the logistics and the how and what and all that can be a significant challenge. So I don't know what all that looks like, but I hope to kind of do some more work on that in the future. Back to the beavers though, we only caught 2, and the beavers really kind of kicked my tail, kind of like I felt the coyotes did. They weren't very active. For one, it was tough. Those canals, some of them were, over chest weight or deep, and we didn't have, a little kayak or something would be perfect for kind of trolling those canals. In some cases, in some areas, the cattails and reeds were so thick that you couldn't even get through there. And so, not that I think the beavers were in those areas, but some of the areas that were kind of flooded where there was dams, where it was deeper, there were no cattails, but and so there was areas where you could kind of see more if you could access it, but the edges of the canals were so steep and the water was so deep, you really needed a small, like a kayak or something to really get around and look in there and try to do more than just sit on the dam. And but the beavers, you break out the dam and it may be 2 or 3 days before they came and cared anything about patching it. It was tough to find where they were staying, where they were living. They didn't seem to be super responsive to castor, which really surprised me. And I had, and I'm still not sure what the case was. I had several of my Belials. All I run is Belial conibears, which are a Magnum style conibear that fully closes. So I've had foot catches, tail catches. If it's in those jaws, it's going to hold it, and that's why I like them. And I had probably at least 3 different cases where the trap was fired and I had nothing. And I never have that happen. I've caught fish, I've caught all kind of things in there just because of the way they close. And so that really puzzled me. I still am not sure what was going on there. But overall, had a lot of learning opportunities, just going and getting in a different place, getting out of your comfort zone. I feel like that's one thing that helps make us better trappers, and so I hope that I can continue to do that and get better as a trapper, and I hope I can continue to share those experiences with y'all. I appreciate the support. I appreciate y'all following along. That's what really drives me is seeing the responses on the videos of I hope you catch a lion or whatever, and then getting the messages. I've already started getting some of folks with their first coyote, and your videos helped me catch this coyote or something like that. Man, that's the reason that I got started doing this, was to try to help people to get started and to discover trapping and the rewarding and satisfaction that it brings. And so and just the trapping community as a whole, and I'll say this, not just the trapping community, but really the rural community in a lot of places. I went out there and stayed with a friend in West Texas, and over Thanksgiving, the neighbors had their family and their families come in, and so I bet there was like 15 kids and probably 10 adults, children and grandchildren, and all that came in, and they came and invited us, and it's kind of awkward going to a complete stranger I've talked to 1 or 2 times, and meeting their whole family and sitting down with them and eating a meal. But you talk about just, they made me feel like I'd known them my whole life, and just welcomed us in, and we ate with them and just talked with them, and I don't know, it was really a neat experience that I would have never volunteered to do that, to just go eat Thanksgiving with complete strangers. But man, it really, that's another learning experience. It gets you out of your comfort zone. I feel definitely like I am better at talking with people. That's something that I've through my job, and then through this also, is kind of forced me to not be the introvert that I really am, but figure out how to put myself out there, how to talk with people, and not just sit around in a corner avoiding people. And I appreciate that because of the interactions that it's allowed me to have, and just the people that it's allowed me to meet. And I can't thank that family enough for just taking us in like they did, and just complete strangers. Y'all come on in and sit down with our family and break bread and enjoy this time of Thanksgiving with us. So that was just a really fitting end. That's we pulled traps on Thanksgiving, and I actually got headed home to try to get home a little bit early, but having that opportunity and just spending it with people that you can't help but care about, just because they care about you. They don't want you to be alone and lonesome on a day that's meant to be with family. So and that being said, I appreciate the heck out of my family back home that is supportive and encouraging and allowing me to go do things like that. And man, I've got that's one group that doesn't get talked about enough, but especially the wives of trappers are a special lot. And I've got a great one. I can't be more proud of her and more thankful for her, and she doesn't get the recognition that she deserves, but I try every little chance I get to show her how much I appreciate her. So anyway, that we covered all kinds of stuff tonight, huh? But if you get the chance to go out of state, go to a different place, man, I strongly encourage you to take that opportunity. And whether you think you are right now or not, a lot of it is about your network and the people that you know as to the opportunities that get presented to you. So just like putting yourself out there and talking to people, I know a lot of us trappers tend to be more introverted, and we don't want to be out there talking with strange people and trying to come up with conversation and things, but building relationships and the people that you never know who may have that contact to get you on a Texas ranch or something like that. So not that you should be selfishly looking for contacts, but just being yourself and caring about others, and you never know where some of that stuff leads. So anyway, I'm going to get off my philosophy soapbox for tonight. I appreciate y'all listening. Stay tuned. The next episode, we've got an interview with Kyle Kotz of Kotz Brothers Lures, and it's a really good interview. I think you're going to like it, and be sure to go check out Kotz Bros Lures, KotzBros.com. They've actually got Kyle set us up with a discount code, so if you enter POPE5, POPE5, as a coupon code, you'll get $5 off any order of $20 or more, and that's good through the end of the year. So especially us southern guys, man, our seasons are just now coming around, so a lot of us are waiting on deer season before we can get out in the woods. Go and get stocked up on some bait and lure, whatever trapping supplies you need. Hit up KotzBros.com, tell them where you came from, tell them Chris sent you, and they'll get you fixed up. I appreciate y'all listening, and good luck on the line.